The Panzer 38T is probably one of the most forgotten yet historically significant tanks of the Second World War, at least from the Wehrmacht side. Originally designed and built in Czechoslovakia, this light tank was adopted and widely used by Germany following their occupation of the nation in 1939. And although it isn't as iconic or as well known as the Panzer IV and Tiger, it arguably is the best tank operated by the Germans during the war. Welcome back to 5 Minute History, the weekly series where patrons choose the topic. This one was chosen by somebody who asked to stay anonymous, but I can say he's a man after my own heart because I love the 38T. Before it became the Panzer 38T, this plucky little tank was known as the LTVZ.38. Now, I won't attempt to pronounce it in Czech, but it means light tank version 38. It was developed by that company as a successor to the earlier LTVZ.35. The design was completed in the mid-1930s and reflected the contemporary tank design philosophy with an emphasis on mobility, reliability, and simplicity. Lessons that the conquering Germans should have learned, but we are thankful they did not take on board. The LTVZ-38 featured riveted armour, a 37mm Skoda A7 gun, two 7.9mm machine guns, all powered by a Praga EPA engine on 125 horsepower. This little tank with a fairly decent sized punch could reach speeds of up to 42 km an hour on roads while protecting the crew with 10 to 25mm of armour. It was a modest but very decent amount of protection against small arms and light anti-tank weapons at the time. Although the tank was initially intended for the Czechoslovak army, the German occupation of Czechoslovakia meant that it was quickly incorporated into the Wehrmacht when the advancing Germans realised its potential. After the occupation, the Germans took control of the company's factories and renamed the tank Panzerkampfwagen 38T, this T standing for the German word for Czech. The Wehrmacht was impressed by the tank's reliability, mechanical simplicity and effective firepower. It should be noted that this tank's contemporaries were vehicles such as the Panzer II, and very early Panzer IIIs, which it absolutely wiped the floor with, especially the Panzer IIs. Production continued under German supervision and the 38T was quickly integrated into German armour divisions. The 38T would serve extensively, carrying the Germans in Poland and the Low Countries and France, bleeding seamlessly into the Blitzkrieg. It was only during Operation Barbarossa where this tank truly began to suffer, as newer and larger vehicles became the order of the day. This amazing vehicle, while able to wipe the floor with early Soviet tanks, was well and truly outclassed by larger vehicles such as the KV-1 and the T-34. To give you an idea of how vital this tank was to German plans, during the invasion of France, 6 panzer divisions were equipped with the Panzer 38T, making it one of the mainstays of the German armoured forces in those early years. In those early war years, the 38T was incredibly formidable. That 37mm main gun could penetrate most enemy armour that it would conceivably face, with the exception of the large Allied vehicles such as the large French tanks. On top of that mobility, it allowed the Germans to exploit breakthroughs and perform reconnaissance at speed. Unlike later German tanks, infamous for their faults, the 38's mechanical reliability was so superior that even many early German tanks, to put it bluntly, suffered compared to it when you compared their reliability. It was by far the best tank in the German army in these early war years, and it wasn't even German. However, as the war progressed, the tank's now lighter and lighter armament and armour were increasingly inadequate against newer Allied and Soviet tanks. Like I said with the T-34 KV-1, the tank's small size also limited possible upgrades, making it less adaptable than the Panzer III or IV, which could be upgunned to deal with the newer threats. This would signal the real end for the 38T in frontline service, and in 1942 it was phased out in favour of more heavily armed and armoured tanks. However, this would be far from the end of its story. Even as it became obsolete as a frontline battle tank, the Panzer 38T's chassis proved to be extremely valuable. The vehicle's rugged and reliable suspension made it an excellent platform for a variety of self-propelled guns and tank destroyers. Most notably, the 38T's chassis was used as a base for the Marder III and the Jagdpanzer 38T Hetzer. These vehicles extended the life and utility of that Panzer 38 design well into 1945. The Hetzer in particular was praised for its compact size, sloped armour and firepower. Between 39 and 42, there were around 1,400 38Ts produced. In addition to the standard versions, A through G, several variants were created, including command tanks, bridge layers, flamethrower prototypes, and recon tanks. Its derivatives, including the Hetzer and the Marder, brought the total production to over 7,000 vehicles based on the 38T chassis. And after the war, the 38T chassis continued to be used in the reconstituted Czechoslovak army where it truly belonged. Vehicles like the ST-1 and post-war tank destroyers would actually be based on that Hetzer design, which itself was based on the 38T. Some Hetzers were also sold into other countries including Switzerland, where they served under the designation of G13 well into the 70s. So why did I say it was the best Panzer? Well, because it did its job, it didn't complain, and it did it well. And when it needed to be retired because it was outdated, which you can't fault it for because it was an early war tank, the design was so good that it found roles that lasted decades after the war. And sure, you can disagree with me, but the beauty of this platform is that you can't stop me from believing that this little plucky 38T was the best Panzer of the war. I really like this tank if you can't tell, and I'm tempted to make a far longer video on it, but tank people scare me, so let me know if it piques your interest. See you next week with another 5, but totally not 5 minutes, more like 7 to 10 minute history snack. I'll catch you next time.